The Halo Designated Marksman Rifle, the DMR. It's a weapon that debuted in Halo Reach, meaning Halo solidified as a franchise before the DMR became a playable weapon. But the DMR is rather peculiar. You see, I believe Bungie had always wanted a powerful semi-automatic weapon that the player would often begin the mission with and would likely retain the weapon due to its reliability in short to medium and medium-long range engagements. We can see this first revealed with the Halo Combat Evolved Magnum. It's not a rifle, but it certainly behaves like one if the scope wasn't obvious enough. Then, as Halo 2 was being developed, there was a long period of time when the battle rifle was a semi-automatic firearm, before being developed for its rapid 3-shot burst. And even when the battle rifle gained its 3-shot burst capability, it still retained its single-shot mode when zoomed in, just months before Halo 2's retail release. Seems as if Bungie valued a weapon that would deal a heavy blow to opponents as long as you weren't at point-blank range and not trying to take on the role of a sniper. But it's evident Bungie did not favor weapons that changed their firing mode when either zoomed in or not. The weapon's firing mode remains consistent, even across different games. Case in point, the battle rifle. From Halo 2 and Halo 3, the weapon consistently retained its 3-shot capability, no matter if you're using the scope. But once Halo Reach started development, that was Bungie's moment to bring forth a weapon they always wanted to implement. A powerful single-shot weapon, in which players often start a campaign mission with, to include beginning a multiplayer match.
Killing spree.
So the UNSC has a powerful rifle, although the Covenant have the devastating needle rifle to counter. Either way, these powerful weapons help show off the Halo Reach ragdoll physics. Despite the mixed reception of how the DMR was implemented in Halo Reach with its reticle bloom, oh boy, I tell you, that topic rivaled armor lock in the 2010 Halo forums. But despite that mixed reception, mod authors have implemented the DMR in various Halo titles, many of them removing reticle bloom to start off with. And shown on screen, Chanson has created a suppressed DMR model for Halo 3 ODST. You can go ahead and download it in the description below. But what if you were to pick up the DMR right now? Or if you were a trooper or marine for the UNSC, how practical would the DMR be, really? We know that the DMR is implemented in Halo Reach to be balanced with the rest of the weapons sandbox. But gameplay aside, how practical is the design of the firearm if you were to start moving around with added weight? Think magazines, Kevlar helmet, and plate carrier, a canteen, a radio, any other equipment. Some of us on this channel, myself included, have been there, done that. That's why I find this topic so interesting and love to see what instructor Lespina, a professional firearms instructor and founder of Spear Training Group, would change and graphically edit the design of these firearms, with the tendency of making the weapons more practical. It would be awesome and a dream to see Instructor Lespina's edits making it to a Halo mod by the talented Halo fans who create modified 3-dimensional models, like this DMR and battle rifle hybrid seen here in Halo Reach Evolved. Given the DMR started in Halo Reach, the debut model is very detailed. So let's see how and why Instructor Lespina went from the original DMR to creating this DMR modification. Yes, I'm showing it to you early, but the most important part is why he makes the changes. Let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome back yet again. Thank you KYOT for the opportunity, and as per popular request, I'm going to be taking a look at the Halo DMR. The one I'm familiar with is Reach, as that is definitely the one I played more than any of the games with it elsewhere after that. Games are meant to be fun, entertaining, so they fall under rule of cool. Generally, if they don't explain it in the game, there are going to be books, there are going to be lore writers, or people who look deeper into the game, and they're going to write their interpretation of what was in the game. If those individuals have some experience, real-world experience, or knowledge, or research abilities, they're gonna lean that towards the rule of practical. And they're going to write the lore for why some of those things exist. What I'm going to do is I am going to point this at rule of practical. Now, just as another explanation of practical, practical is what actually works for humans, our anatomy, and things that we have to consider. So not only am I going to be looking at how this would fit in your hand and how you're going to use this, I'm also going to be looking at the historical application of these weapons. Where might this weapon actually be employed? What works? What doesn't? How has that type of stuff worked in the past? Because that's what we do. We develop, we iterate, and we learn. I am going to be applying all of that knowledge and history and information, and I'm going to be pointing it at rule of practical. Now, I do have the wiki up. I am going to be looking into it a little bit, but I am not going to acknowledge incorrect information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lean this in the direction of rule of lore, but I'm going to point my iteration then back at rule of practical. What would it actually look like if this were a real firearm? I already see a few things. As you see here, I moved my brush to equal 1 pixel. So whenever I click, it's going to be 1 pixel. You can actually see I've already got a little line here. So I've got my start directly at the muzzle. And if you can see down here at the bottom of the screen, it tells you how many pixels across I am measuring. I'm going to show you why this is important. So as I draw this line and I'm holding it out, we're at about 1806. Yeah, we're about 1806 pixels directly across. Just to make sure I'm getting my angle right, let's zero that out. 1805, 1806 or so. So if I were to draw a line directly across, that is 1,806 pixels long. Why is that important? Wiki here, they offer how many centimeters long that is. So that's about 109 centimeters or 1,090 millimeters, which gives me a good little conversion table. I'll save you the math, and I did a little bit of rounding here just to make numbers easier. 1,800 pixels is equal to 1,090 millimeters. That's approximately 1.65 pixel per millimeter. I'm not going to pull measurements for every single item I measure whenever I do this, but I do want that to be known how I pull measurements. Reason being, I'm pulling measurements of, say, a magazine. This is chambered, by the way, in 7.62 by 51. So we're looking at 71 millimeters is equal to about 1.65. So that should be approximately 117 pixels. Now magazines, they are going to be a little bit longer than that. So again, if you see my number down here at the bottom, that's telling me my pixel measurement here. That's, even if I give a little bit of extra room here, that's about that long. So in the case of this magazine, which is inserted at this point and expands all the way back here, this is what's being pulled out of the weapon every time you reload. This is a large amount of material for that magazine to have. Whenever we're using conversion tables and lore measurements, we can pull the accurate measurements of how long these magazines should be. And that is going to be very, very important here. Whenever we look at the final iterations, I'm going to make a straight line directly down this barrel and action. This green line here is the barrel to action. We also know that this here is the magazine, and we know that it only has to be about this long. This even, by the way, this gives, we said it was 117 a minute ago. This gives an additional 30 or so millimeters of play for reinforcing material. You do want to make sure your magazines are strong. So even this is slightly larger than the actual rounds there that are being chambered into this weapon. We have our barrel, we have our magazine. That's about where they're going to line up. We see that we have a charging handle up here. So we know that whenever you charge this back and return it back forward, it has to interact on our bolt. That is how we chamber the rounds. So I'm going to make an extremely crude drawing here of what the bolt possibly looks like. As we don't have a cutaway, I can't tell you specifically what type of bolt this would be, but I'm just going to show you a possibility. Whenever you pull this charging handle, it is going to pull the entire bolt backwards. That way it can pick up a new round and chamber it into the barrel in action. Now, this is not a large bolt. In a lot of the typical rifles, especially nowadays, you do see large bolts, especially on this type of caliber. There's a significant difference between the mass of your bolt carrier, the gas going into the system, and the resistance of the system. So the mass of the bolt carrier, if we're going to do a bullpup design like this right here, this is what's actually stripping the round off the top of the magazine and loading it. This must travel behind the magazine in order to pick up that round, right? That means, let's see how long this is. That's 65 pixels. So even if I give it just a little bit of room here, that means that bolt must travel to about this point in its rearward actuation. And that means I have about this much room here to pack on a recoil spring. Now, the recoil spring also has material. That means it's going to have to compress. The bolt can't necessarily slam all the way to the back because there's a spring in between it and the back of the weapon. That's the length of travel. Between the mass of the bolt carrier, which is not a huge amount, the spring pressure, which can be heavy, and the gas system, that is all of the stuff we have to consider whenever this gun is cycling. We've shown the spring, we've shown the bolts. So let's take a look at our gas system. So here's what we have. We know from the description that this is a gas-operated bullpup. We know about the length of travel that we need to power on the action and the spring. So it appears that our gas system is either tapped here or here. If I had to take a bet, it'd probably be on this bulkier section here. However, it's not unreasonable that it would be tapped off a little earlier as well. There are different pros and cons, but a thing called dwell time, basically how long that gas is allowed to build up pressure and stuff, kind of changes a few things. But one thing I do want to consider is this is more than likely an adjustable gas system as well. Because of our limitations with our bolt size, more than likely are going to very closely tune this gas system. Another reason, the in-game DMR has a very slow fire rate, kind of like a chugga 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 chugga. There are delaying mechanisms that could be employed in this system, especially if it's considered to be in the same caliber as the assault rifle, which has a fast fire rate and is in the same chambering as this. I can only assume that there are some type of delaying mechanism, mechanical delaying mechanisms that are in place that are going to slow this down. Now, is it game balance? Absolutely, it's game balance. But let's assume for a minute that there's a mechanical difference here. So this gas system is going to be more or less in a straight line. Our bolt carrier is going to need a linkage on this charging handle. That way we can actually cycle it. It needs to be able to travel enough to strip around off the top of this magazine and load it into the chamber. So our gas system needs to somehow come into contact with this bolt carrier to be able to push it back against the existing spring and press it back into place. Now, there are many different ways to do springs. One of them that is possible is that it uses a vector-like recoil system. Basically, you can have a hinging point somewhere in here, and the bolt would just go down into the stock. This would be a little less than ideal. Has cool factor, but less than ideal. Because it is behind the shooting grip, whenever it knocks down and stops its travel at this point, it would actually pull your stock slightly out of your shoulder. So it's not likely that that is the design methodology behind it. So I'm going to assume that this is either a small bolt with a very top spring and tuned gas system, or it is a telescopic bolt, which means it actually comes around or encases the barrel or the action in some kind of way. If you look at Uzi bolts and early submachine gun bolts, they have telescopic bolts. They actually go over the action in the barrel of the weapon. Pros and cons to this, but this is a possibility. And one thing that you can do with these telescopic bolts is outside of the barrel, but inside of the telescopic bolt, you can actually encase your springs there. So whenever your bolt goes rearward, it compresses that spring, so on and so forth. There are many different ways to do this. For what we're going to do today, I'm going to assume it's a very basic action like this. I don't know. But the big challenge that we have is, where is this gas system going? This gas has to get up to the bolt in some kind of way. It could be right here. It could potentially have a transfer bar that goes all the way up, and there's a mechanical linkage between them. We don't know. The problem with this is this hot gas is going to hit this linkage, which is going to put a lot of angular pressure or leveraging pressure on this mechanism, which is going to make it not that efficient. It's actually going to force, from this point, the rear of the bolt carrier up while forcing the front of the bolt carrier down. It's not likely that that's the case. We could also have the gas tap off at an angle. Not impossible. The AR-15, M16, M4 variants, they actually do something like this. It is not this extreme of an angle, though. This is actually a pretty extreme angle, because all this gas pressure and heat buildup is going to come hammering down this straight line, and it's going to slow down suddenly as it takes this angle. That's how you get ruptured gas tubes in AR. For granted, the gas tube in an AR-15 is in that place and manufactured the way it is so that it fails before the rest of the gun. It's very intentional to be that way. Good news though, this is not a high volume of fire weapon. So whatever gas system, whatever linkage this is, it doesn't matter too much, because we're not just mag dumping with this thing. We're not getting incredible heat buildup like we are with machine guns and assault rifles at that. Still heat? Yeah. Is metal expanding and contracting? Yeah, but not at the same rate as some of the other platforms. So more than likely, this gas system is just going to be tapped off at an angle, whether that's be a piston or a gas impingement system. Who knows? It's open for speculation. But that is the gas system that we need to consider. Now that's how I do measurements and I draw out the general layout of the weapon. So let's look at the exterior of the weapon to see what doesn't make sense. This type of muzzle device is really, really long, and they tend to vibrate at a harmonic kind of frequency and ring. So we're going to change up some of that. I did consider changing this little lump here. However, this entire surface looks very round. So more than likely, whenever you go and grab your wrench, you want something for it to bite on so you can actually twist this thing off. So I'll leave that in place. This appears to be some type of laser or red dot sight, maybe a Neuralink setup, whatever. I don't know what it is, but I'm not going to change it. If it is a laser sight or Neuralink, it's going to stay there. It's small and mostly out of the way, so I'm not going to mess with it. Our front sight here, this is a designated marksman rifle. It is almost always going to be with a scope on top. And you can get etched reticles, that way you don't have to have a power supply, like batteries or sunlight or whatever. So we're going to change this front sight. We're going to change how high up this is lifted. If you'll take a look here, the center of our objective lens is pretty high above the center of our barrel. That's going to be a mechanical offset. This creates issues whenever you're ranging and trying to shoot accurately. Considering this is a marksman weapon, this gap here becomes more important. So we're going to reduce that gap a little bit. This optic, the objective lens itself, is pretty small. Having a small objective lens means you can't get that much light. So if we make it larger, it's going to be able to collect even more light. No reason not to. The space is there, so we're going to do it. This bottom grip it's not unreasonable. It goes all the way out to the edge of the gas system, and it comes all the way back to our trigger guard mechanism, so it's actually pretty good. There's not any real wasted space here, with the exception of this. I don't know what this is. I can't find an explanation for it or anything. We're going to do away with that. And this trigger guard as well, we're going to do away with that as well. These are things that get in the way. It just benefits overall to get rid of some of that ergonomic stuff. This trigger guard, you can see how that would be uncomfortable. Every time the gun recoils, it's going to hit your knuckle right there. So we're going to change that up. Some of these geometries are very different. We're going to do some slight altering on that, not huge. But we do change up this trigger as well. As for the fire selector, looks pretty good. I'm not going to change anything about fire selector here. Charging handle, you already know. We're going to be changing that. Having it close to your face, especially when it recoils. Let's see. There you go. There's a handsome little face. Whenever this recoils a little bit, the fact that there is a nub there moving back towards your face a little bit can create an artificial flinch reflex. It's one of the things you kind of train over, but it's just something to be considered. If it doesn't need to be there, hey, we can change it. Which I can tell you now, it doesn't need to be there. This nub doesn't need to be there. This nub doesn't need to be there. This is a cheek riser. I don't know why there's this sharp angular piece on there that just kind of disables the purpose of that. And as always, our magazine is unduly large. As I've explained before, these become a problem. This magazine is only really needed to be as big as we explained earlier, so all of this excessive material is not necessary. It makes it more difficult to store in an armory, to ship out to other battalions and platoons who are going to be fighting. Makes it really difficult to put it in your web gear or however you're storing it on your person. This extra bulk could easily be translated into an additional magazine on your plate carrier or wherever you're carrying it. So not having it is much better. I did see some comments that suggested it could be related to an ammo counter, or it could be related to, say, like a coil spring design. Not unreasonable, but this is a lot of additional manufacturing in order to make things work. And when you're talking losing ammunition capacity for warfighters just for a unique magazine design, it's less than ideal. You would rather your people have more ammunition as opposed to have a cool little mag.
Which also means that is not practical.
As far as the ammo counter, you don't want to have digital bits attached to disposable pieces that you're going to be swapping out. Because if you're carrying 10 magazines on you and then maybe one of them doesn't work, it's going to screw up your own system. Instead, it makes sense to have your digital computer, your counter, somewhere in the weapon itself. And maybe it just reads the position of your spring. As that spring starts riding up, you create some type of magnetic reader or copper reader, and your computer just senses where that is, and it knows the algorithm for it. That's much easier than trying to put it on board a disposable piece of equipment that may get damaged or lost. So those are all the things that we're really going to consider. So let's take a look at the updated variants. This is our updated DMR. Back and forth. And we're going to go from the front to the back. We reduced the length of the pronged flash hider on the end. We did keep this nub here. You will notice our pronged flash hider has these little cutouts in it as well. These can help that harmonic ringing and that tone that it's going to emit when it shoots, just like having them offset at different lengths helps the tone whenever it shoots. So that's why we did that. Gas system, no reason to change it again. I'm just assuming this is an adjustable gas system. Don't really need to display it. You can have gas systems that don't actively show like a knob or a lever, and they're still adjustable. The overall height over bore axis, we've reduced it. That entire chunk of material here has been completely removed. And we just lowered the optic itself. All right, clean up my image. We lowered the optic itself. We enlarged our objective lens so we can get a little bit more light transmission in there. And we pulled our charging handle forward. Now, I did see some comments that charging handles forward can get in the way of the optic sometimes. For example, if you have an ACOG scope on a SCAR, be it heavy or light, sometimes trying to charge it, you get your knuckles caught up on those optic mounts, and that is 100% true. In this case, this is a very smooth optic, so it doesn't appear to be an issue. And again, we do want to have this a little further away from our face. As for our foregrip here, first off, you can see we've reduced that large computer mass in this trigger guard here, just to elongate the handguard. Now, there is a theory that you could brace your weapon up against stuff like that. That is a PRS discipline, or precision rifle shooting discipline thing. It's a great way to brace a weapon. However, doing this works as well, and it has less bulk and random material. So that's what we did. I just increased a little cutout to enable that, especially on a marksman style rifle. All this computer stuff is gone because it doesn't seem to need to be there at all. So it's been removed. Trigger guard. We made this thing more comfortable. I have a little bit more room here for that top finger. Your middle finger is still going to kind of drop in there. And your smallest finger on your hand still has plenty of room. It is worth noting, you'd kind of want these to be a little bit closer than this really aggressive spacing. You see it in some of the Glock generations. I believe it was Glock Generation 2 that had no finger grooves. And then 3 and 4, they included the finger grooves. And then Generation 5, the most recent one, they removed the finger grooves again. It's really a preferential thing, but what it does is it limits your hand. It forces your hand, no matter what your hand size is, it forces your hand into these recesses. Whereas if it's just smooth, you can put your fingers wherever you want. Ideally, higher up on the weapon is better. We did elongate our trigger a little bit. Again, no changes to the fire selector in this model. So let's get to the big one. The rear of this weapon. So as you see, we reduced all of this unnecessary mass. And as explained before, the action can come rearward. There are many guns where the spring mechanism actually travels through the center of the action. This is a very common space-saving solution. If we assume that is going to be the case, then this all can fit in place. And I did reduce this overall length of pull here a little bit. You can probably tell by some of the weird shading effects. But let's see. So the cheek riser has actually been pulled up to here. And a large amount of material back here has been removed. All of this was pulled forward, I believe, to right about there. Again, just shortening up that length of pull. So the thing is with length of pull, if you have a really long weapon and you really got to reach out and grab it, it makes it very difficult for some shooters to get a hold on there. So shortening up a length of pull is overall beneficial if you're able to do it. And again, is there technically enough room in this action to make it work? Yes, but we have to have some type of delaying mechanisms in there to make this happen. And from the shooting in game and the staccato fire rate that this weapon has, it's fairly easy to assume that that is the case. It's not a huge fire rate weapon. Now, one of the things I do really want to bring up here, this is in the same chamber as the assault rifle, same cartridge, that is, as the assault rifle. And it's very efficient to have them use the exact same magazine. In fact, you really want to avoid having magazine diversity at all if you can avoid it. If this is in the same chamber, and if it makes sense that your designated marksman carries the same magazine as your assault rifle guy, this in theory should also be a 36 round magazine or whatever capacity magazine that we're having on the team. Magazine sharing is extremely important in a battlefield environment. Not only that, but in a battlefield environment where you can't reliably resupply, it's extremely important. So this being 15 rounds shouldn't be the case. This should be increased a bit for that sake of magazine capacity. And in addition to that, this is a little bit longer than the assault rifle overall, so it does have a little bit of extra damage and velocity that's going to come out of it. Maybe even a notable amount of damage and velocity that's going to come out of it. But that also means you should be increasing that assault rifle damage quite a bit, because I don't know the actual math on it, but it shouldn't take 10 rounds for the assault rifle to down a regular enemy, and this thing, what, 2-3 rounds? That is not at all it. If this thing is downing a, say, grunt in 3 body shots, because of the chambering of the weapons being the same, being the barrel lengths are similar, not exactly same, the assault rifle should be able to do it in about 4, maybe 5 rounds body shots. Just something to consider whenever we're building these things. If we're going to have shared ammunition, they need to have similar damage profiles. Where that becomes an exception, if we chop that barrel substantially, then it becomes a problem. As I've explained before, bullet mass is a very kind of linear thing. The more mass you have, the more damage it's going to do. Bullet velocity, though, is not. If you can get a bullet going faster, it is going to count for more when it comes to dealing damage. That is why we've been making shifts to having high velocity bullets as opposed to bigger bullets. Now, you do see an interesting case like with the XM7, US military's newest edition, I guess you'd say, where they have a higher mass bullet, but it's also cooking at a very fast rate. They're trying to find a balance between how much velocity and mass is good. The big trade-off to that theory, though, very bad barrel life. They're you service members have probably experienced this, but the weapon that sits in the armory at a training base is not the best kept weapon, and it's not the most accurate weapon either. It costs money and time to rebarrel a rifle, and whenever you have a significantly smaller barrel life, like on the new XM7s, it's just a curiosity of how much extra expense is that going to be on a government or a force, and how much additional time and resources is that going to take. Is it actually worth it? Because when it's just a civilian weapon, it's okay if it'll go 10,000 rounds without needing a new barrel. When it's a military rifle that's doing 20,000 rounds, yeah, that makes a substantial difference, especially when it comes to accuracy. Being that this is a designated marksman rifle, something in between a sniper rifle and an assault rifle, accuracy really matters for a lot. So these are just some things to consider whenever we're building these things out. This is my interpretation of what an updated weapon might look like. And again, we have all different types of material here, and you'll probably remember from the assault rifle video, I actually cut this quite substantially down. If you haven't read it in the comments, I'm not trying to tune this to 100% practicality. I'm just more or less trying to increase the practicality by 60 or 70%. Because if I did 100% practicality, this would no longer look like the weapons that you know and love. And I do have a plan to tune a particular weapon soon to 100%, just to show what it looks like. But I do want to retrain some of the aesthetic sometimes. So, yeah. Hate me if it doesn't match up with exactly what I said before. That's part of the fun of it, is picking and playing and seeing what works, what doesn't, and how it looks, and you know, that's fun. Anyway, let me know on any lore that I probably forgot or didn't know about. Let me know what you guys want to see next, and thank you KYOT and his awesome community for this opportunity again. I appreciate this, and this is certainly a delightful amount of fun, and I hope we can continue doing it. Thank you all, and have a good one.
It's neat to see how a more practical DMR would look. Thank you, Instructor Laspina, for taking the time to do so. I've made a playlist on my channel containing all of the practical Halo weapons that Instructor Laspina has created so far. It's really fun to deep dive into these weapons and hear what he has to critique, and see why he makes the changes that he makes. You may check out Instructor Laspina's channel in the description. You can also check out my other videos I've created. Thank you very much for watching.